Can you hear me? I think I think you guys can hear me. Actually, can you guys hear me? Um, all right. All right. I'm just gonna get started right now. Um, okay. Okay, cool. All right, this is the first time I'm doing a workshop, so this is gonna be an intro to Python workshop. Um, Mostly meant for people who already have like what's it called? Some experience programming, maybe in Java. Um, but yeah, all right, we'll get started. So first we'll go over like the structure of Python programs. So Python is most lines in Python are made of expressions, assignments, values, and names. So to give an example here, expressions and statements, they usually compute a value or carry out an action. So for example, making like a variable is an assignment statement. That's a type of a statement. But an expression would be something like 5 plus 2 that computes some value, like 5 plus 2 is 7. So yeah, we can, here's some examples here. Like 18 plus 45, 6 divided by 23. These are all like different types of computations. Um, yeah, these are all different types of expressions here, but the one that's important is f of x because that's like is basically what Python does is it takes in an input and then gives you an output, which is basically what a function is, which we'll go over later today. So here's like a demo of Python. You can go over here to REPL. I don't know if you guys have REPL, but yeah, I could give you the link. REPL. Okay. But yeah, I'm just gonna open a little Python interpreter here. So if I type in something like 5, that's an expression. It's just gonna give me 5. It doesn't really do anything, but that's an expression itself. If I type in like 5 plus 6, though, this will compute a value, 11. So very similar to like Java, what we've done before. You could type in something a little more complicated, like 2000 plus 20 plus 3. So that'll give me 2023. And then maybe something more complicated. So like this, 5, 4 times hang on. Oh God. That'll also give me 2023. So these are all examples of expressions. They just compute a value. Nothing too complicated. And then another type of expressions are calling functions, calling names. So over here, POW is a function, and these parentheses here just indicate that POW is a function, and 102 are inputs to the function. So if you guys know a little bit of math, you can maybe figure out what this is doing. It's just taking 100 and raising it to the power of 2, so 100 squared. And same thing here, this is 2 to the power of 100. And Python's really good at handling large numbers. So as you can see, it's a very large number, but it computes it pretty fast. And then max is also a function. It's a pretty common function in Python. And what it does is you give it a bunch of inputs. You could pass in a bunch of numbers or like a list or something, and it'll give you the maximum number. So between 1, -2, 3, and -4, 3 is the max one. So it gives you that. And this is a little bit more complicated expression here, but we could try to evaluate it ourselves. Python evaluates expressions from left to right. So you start with max, so it's going to take the max of a bunch of these inputs, and these two, and then a bunch of these are inputs here. So we have the minimum of 1 and -2, that'll be -2. And then this is the minimum of POW 3, 5, and -4. So the minimum of that, well, 3 to the power of 5 is really large. So I'm guessing the minimum would be -4. So then this minimum function evaluated to -2, this minimum function evaluated to -4, and then the maximum between -2 and -4 is -2. Okay, so going back to expressions, so these are kind of like types of variables. So we have numbers, strings, and then names, which are just other variables that you can make yourself. And then some arithmetic expressions that we went over before. And then call expressions like functions. So with Python, we could also import different libraries. Like, I'll go over here. So for example, a common one is the math library. So to import a library, we can just hit import math, and then this will give us a bunch of different functions. For example, we could compute the square root of like 4. So, hold up. From math, import square root. Now if I hit run, hang on. I need to use this in the interpreter. So if I go over here, from math, import square root, that will import the square root function. And now I can compute the square root of 4. Pretty simple. Some other ones are like the add function, which isn't used much. Oh, hang on. As you can see, add does not work, but if we import it from operator, if we import like add mul, then we can use add, and that will give us 5. Yeah, this is not used much because you could also just do 2 + 3, but I just wanted to give you a little demo of like importing libraries and stuff. One thing that or a lot of people use Python for is because of its libraries. If you've heard of like machine learning or AI, there's a bunch of cool things like TensorFlow. Is a big library that Google made for AI, and there's a bunch of functions and a bunch of stuff that they've made that makes programming in Python a lot easier. Yeah, so that's importing libraries. Oh yeah, here's some other libraries. Random is a library for generating random numbers. Copy for copying lists and other types of data structures. Okay, so Going back to values, so these are like types of variables. Hello. Um, the value of this expression is just itself, but the value of this expression is 3.5. Just straightforward stuff. So here are different types of data, so integers and floats, just like Java. I think in Java you use double more commonly, but in Python they're called floats. It's just decimal numbers. Yeah, and then strings, of course, and booleans. So just like normal, except in Python, you capitalize T and F for true and false. That's just something you do in Python. Okay, so conversions. Python, as you could see, you don't really have to declare like integer types. Everything is kind of implied, sort of. So when I do 2 times 1.0, so this turns the integer 2 to a float, 2.0. So same in Java. Okay, going back to the functions from earlier, this is how Python like evaluates a call expression. So again, we're going back to add 2, 3. So the add function, remember, it just adds the operands. So to evaluate this, you evaluate the operator. So that's just Python will go to this function and be like, okay, add, what is add? Okay, it's a function. And then because it's a function, it has to have operands. So it'll go and it'll look at the inputs, and then it will repeat the process. It will try to evaluate each operand. So again, for this like nested call expression, Python will go to add first, then it'll realize it's a function, then it will see its operands. So there's one operand here and then another one here. And so for this operand here, it'll operate it left to right. So then it'll evaluate this and then repeat the process. It'll evaluate this, and then this will have a value, and then this will have a value, and then it'll add them at the end. So humans work the same way. So as you can see, this is how it's evaluating it. So first goes to this one, and then it works. It starts inside out, so it'll go to the inner calls, and then out and out until at the end you're just adding 30 and 15. Okay, this is just going over exactly what I said. So, but this is actually a cool visual. So, first Python will go to the add function, and then it'll go to the first operand, and then it'll realize that is also an add function, and then it'll go to the operands for that call, and then it'll evaluate this, the multiply function, and then that'll be 24. So 24 and 6, it'll add it to 30, and then same thing here, you get 15, and then it adds 30 and 15. So now we're going to go over variables, or another name is names, I guess, in Python. So to create a variable, you just assign it with an equal sign. So as you can see here, x equals 1 plus 2 plus whatever. The name is x, and that's the expression. And this expression will evaluate to some value, and that value is assigned to x. A key difference here between Java and Python is that Java, you have to declare a type. So in Java, if I were to declare a variable x, I would write int x equals 5. But as you can see in Python, int isn't a thing. Like it doesn't like this. You just write x equals 5. It's a lot easier than Java. Instead of having to write like string, name, like my name, I don't have to do that in Python. I could just write name equals my name. Like right here, I could show you name equals, I don't know, my name is Neil. So that I just evaluated this assignment statement. The statement itself didn't do anything, But now if I were to take name and hit enter, the value of name is this string, Neil. So yeah. But that's also where you can get some like pretty funky stuff actually. So in Python, actually, we do have names for functions. So functions themselves are names. So if I were to say like, okay, the max between 3 and 5 is, I mean, what is that? That's 5, right? But let's say I set max equal to 3, and now I call max. Max is 3. So, and then if I try to call this again, this function, it doesn't work. The reason why is because here I'm using max as the function max. It returns the maximum. Then I take max and I assign it to the value 3. So Python actually thinks of this as a new variable with the name max. So inside like the Python language, it's gonna think that like originally max was a function, but now it's gonna think max is a variable and it's tied to this value 3. So when I evaluate it, it gives me 3. Now when I try to use it as a function again, it no longer works because it says it's an integer object, and it's not callable. Only functions are callable. So what did I just do here? Well, I just got rid of my max function. But yeah, that's just like a funky thing that happens in Python. So just you got to be careful with making sure you're not overwriting variables. I mean functions. Yeah, here's another bit of code here. So we can set f equal to min. So this will actually set it to the min function. So f is actually a function here, not just a variable. And then now we could set it to max. And then g and h. Oh, here's something else I want to show you in Python. So in Java, if I wanted to make two variables, great, integer x equals 5, and then integer y equals like 10. In Python, you can do the same thing by writing x equals 5 and y equals 10. Sorry, that should be a 5. But you could also do it in one line. So I could just write x and y is equal to 5 and 10. So it just sets x equal to 5, y equal to 10. And you can do this on and on. So I can do like even z equals like 20. So you could assign like multiple statements in one line. This even works for like, if I wanted to try this, let's say over here, it all works? So like x is 5, y will give me 10, z will give me 20. I could even do it again with like z equaling like a string or something, like I don't know, Sierra College. Z will be Sierra College. So yeah, that's just a neat trick. So over here, g is minimum and h is max, and I can set max equal to g. So now when I'm evaluating this last line here, this is might be a little confusing, but basically f is now the max function and g is now the minimum function, and the max function is actually g, so max is now the minimum function. So just some weird stuff. Okay. If we wanted to visualize this, we could do that with something. Okay, oops. Here. All right. This website, pythontutor.com, is really good at seeing what is actually happening behind the scenes in Python. So I'm just going to paste in some code, this same code, visualize execution. So Python's going to start with the first line, and then it tells me, okay, f is the minimum function. And then now it's overwritten, f is now the max function. So we're taking our variable here, and this is the object that it's assigned to. And then now we're creating g and h as new variables, and they're G is pointing to the min function, H is also pointing to the max function. And then lastly, we take the max function itself and we point that to minimum. So now when we evaluate this last line, max, these are like the new values of the functions. Yeah, and this is a really good website to help you understand what's really going on in your program. So if you're like ever debugging and stuff, this is really good. So I'll actually put this here in the meeting chat, or here, so you guys can go back to it later. Okay. Okay. Yep, this is exactly what we just did here. All right. Okay, just to recap what we went over, the structure of Python programs consists of statements, and those could include expressions, and then expressions usually evaluate to values, and they're usually computations like 5 plus 2. Values or variables can be assigned to names, and then assignment statements help you assign the value of expressions to variable names. Okay, so that was a little bit of an introduction. Now we're going to get into something a little bit better, which is functions, a little more interesting. So functions allow you to take a bunch of expressions and stuff and hide that away into a function. And they take in arguments and return a value. So this is basically the same thing as Java. But in Python, we use the define def to create a function. So I'll make an example here. So if I wanted to create a function, I'll just type def. That tells Python, okay, I'm defining a function. Sorry, I'll delete some of that. Define, and then square. So if I wanted to square a number here, what does this mean? Well, I write def. That tells Python, okay, I'm making a function. Square, that's the name. And then in the parentheses here, I'll specify what arguments I want. So unlike Java, I don't have to tell it, okay, this is an integer. I actually just write some variable. And then I can return, so like my input was x and my output would just be x times x as the square. So now I can run that here. Okay, so Python realizes that's my function. And then if I wanted to call my function, I could just write square, just like we did previously, just square, and then I can put in 3, and that should give me 9. There you go, it gives me 9. But I don't have to just use the interpreter here. I could also just write print square. Oh, I realized I never went over print. Should probably do that. So the print in in Java, we use system.out.println, and then you type whatever you want. But that's really long. In Python, all you do is print, and then whatever you want to print. So in my case here, if I wanted to print, if name was defined like this, and I wanted to print name, I hit run, and it gives me my name. If I wanted to print the output of square root 3 or square 3, then there you go, it gives me 9. But yeah, this is generally how functions are made in Python. And then if I wanted to add more inputs, I could add like y, z, and well, it's giving me some squigglies here because it's telling me, okay, you made a function with some inputs, but you're not using all my inputs, so like y and z are not used. But I mean, I could add it here, like times y plus z if I wanted to, and then go back to here, could add like 2, 3, run, and then Python will just evaluate that for me. I get 21. So the general structure, again, just repeating it, this is the function signature. In the first line, we have the def statement, the name, and then the parameters, and then you return whatever you want. You could also add more to your body of your function. So let's see. Okay, just a little bit behind the scenes. Functions are created through environment diagrams in Python. You don't really need to know all this stuff. This is like a little more high level of how Python is actually like interpreted by the computer and gives you what you want. But it's a little too complicated for today. No need to really go through like frames and stuff. But yeah, going back to here, you can even pass in expressions to Python. So you can even pass in 1 minus 3 here, and then it'll realize the argument is -2. Yeah. Okay. Lambda expressions. Let's go through a little demo of lambda expressions. Yeah, okay. So lambda expressions are expressions that give you functions. So I can create this function here, define square, as a variable. So I can make a variable square and assign it to lambda. X is my input, and the colon just tells me, okay, we'll return x times x. And then if I wanted to, okay, I don't know what it's telling me. And then print and then I can use square result equals square 3, and then print my result. Okay, I'll use a new name, new square. And then I hit run. My result gives me 9. Yeah. Okay, I'm also realizing I didn't go over something pretty basic about Python. There's no classes by default, so Python code is just, you just type whatever you want. You just go straight into things like 2 plus 3, whatever. And making functions and stuff, you don't need any classes. And then also in Java, if I wanted to make a function, I would indicate the return type, then type the name of the function, and then like the inputs, so input 1, input 2 if I wanted to, and I'd also have to specify the type of the input, so like if this was an integer or a string. And then I wouldn't use a colon, I would actually just use curly braces, and then in here I would type, okay, return whatever. This is all Java. This is what Java would do. Java. But in Python, you use the def and you indent everything. So if I want something inside my function, I would use an indent. So everything inside of it is indented automatically. And you could have multiple lines. So like I could have x equals y, or I could have like, I don't know, y, make a new variable, a equals y plus z, and then I could return x times a or something. So yeah, as you can see, both of these lines here are inside my function, but they must be indented for it to work in Python. So instead of curly braces, we use indents. Yeah, and then another thing about the print function, we could print like text. So run this, that'll give me hello. I could print multiple things, so I could print hello, my name is, and then up here I said my name is equal to, I can write Neil now, and then if I write name, hello my name is, that will give me hello my name is Neil. So it'll insert your variable into there. Okay. back to functions. So lambda expressions, right, are a little more complicated. They are functions in one line. So generally they're used for like very simple things. So right here, I'm just squaring a number. So what I indicate is that this new square is some variable. And then by using the lambda keyword, that tells me, okay, new square is actually going to be a function. And then your inputs you specify here. So I can have multiple inputs if I wanted to. And then after the inputs, I have to put a colon. And then whatever goes on the right side is the value that is returned. So if I have an input of x, then I'm returning x times x, and that will basically square the number. And then here I'm just storing the result of the call to the function with 3 as my input, and then I'm printing that result, and that gives me 9 over here. The other stuff is from these previous lines, which I'll just delete. So, hang on. Name equals. Okay. Cool. This is just walking through the same thing. So we have a function, perimeter x returns x times x, and then some examples of it. So using square here, when I try to evaluate square, it tells me that a square is a function. And then if I try to evaluate square of 4, then it will actually pass that as input. Okay. The def statement is very similar to lambda, but lambdas are for one-line functions. So you can't have multiple lines within a lambda function. Again, Python, if it binds names to values, so the name square is bound to a function, whether you use a lambda statement or a define statement or not. So they basically do the same thing behind the scenes. Okay, so here's print. So in Java, we have different return types or different types of variables like integers, floats, doubles, whatever, strings. Python is the same thing, but in Java we have like a null data type that just tells you that there's nothing there. In Python, we have the none variable or data type. So none is Python's way of indicating that nothing is there. So one function that uses none, or actually, let me just show you none in the shell. So I'm just gonna open an interactive Python thing. Okay, if I make a variable x equal to none, and then I try to see what the value of x is, it tells me that it's nothing. Whereas if I did x equals 5, and I said, okay, what is x? It gives me 5. But before, when I set it to none, it literally did nothing. Like, it was just none. So going back to functions, this square function here, the lambda or whatever, just make this square again. This returned x times x. So it takes in a number and then squares it. So the return type of this function is like either an integer or float. But print is also a function. As you can see here, it takes, it's a name, and then it has operands in between, like result here, which is equal to the square of 3, and then it prints that operand. But what if I printed nothing? That gives me print. But if I wanted to evaluate print, like I save the value of print, and now what does x give me? It's none. So print, what is this doing here? It's print and returning a type are different things. So print itself returns none, but print will print something. Like the action of print is to print something, but its return type is none. That's just a small thing in Python as well. Yep, so over here, so none represents nothing again, but if a function does not explicitly have a return statement, then it will return none. So this function here does not return square. It's a very fitting name because it doesn't actually return anything. It just computes x times x. So if I did this, if I put 4 in here, it should give me 16. So then if I save the result of the function call into a variable called 16, 16 plus 4 should give me 20, but look, we get an error because 16 is actually bound to none. This function actually didn't return anything. So make sure you're returning. Pure and non-pure functions, that's a little complicated. So we're just gonna skip that for now. Also, we do have a nested expressions with print. This isn't that important as well. So just to summarize here, functions encapsulate like multiple statements, just like in Java. We use the def statement to create it, and then there are parameters, and then the body of the function, remember, is indented. So over here it's indented, like return. Yeah. And then let's see, what else do we have? Yeah, call expressions are used to call your functions, and you pass in your operands or inputs with the parentheses, just like in Java. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So those are like the basics of Python. And does anyone have any questions? I'm just gonna go into some Python demos in a quick second. So if you have any questions, just leave it in the chat. I'm gonna pull up some questions. Hang on. Okay, wait, give me like 2 minutes. I'm gonna pull up some like examples of Python code. Okay, I'm back. All right. Just as a disclaimer here, I do want to be like transparent. These slides are from UC Berkeley. They're like CS61A class. It's like their intro to programming class. I did not make these slides myself. I do not have the time or the knowledge to do this, but they have really good content. And then I also stole this from a class I'm taking right now, not at this college, but at another school. But it's good practice. So I wasn't gonna make up my whole thing, but okay. So we're gonna go over a quick little thing here. So here's like a simple problem here. We need to make a function here that makes a creative expression that evaluates to 2022. For example, we could return something like 2020 plus 2, and then I ran this here. Oh, okay. I should go over something else. So this is a function, of course, and then over here we have a comment. So in Python, in Java, you type / for your comments, but in Python, we use the hashtag. So that'll make a comment. But if I wanted to make a multi-line comment, then I could use the triple quote. So that'll give me like whatever, a bunch of comments. So this will be like multiple lines. Whatever's inside of the triple quotes will be commented. You could also just use multiple lines. So like line 1, another hashtag for line 2. So yeah, those are just different things. In Python, another thing you could do when making a function that's really helpful is something called a doc test. So you surround it with triple double quotes. So instead of just using single quotes, you use double quotes. And you just write, you could write like, okay, what does the function do? And then you could write some of the doc tests here. So a doc test just tells you like how should the function behave. So what this is telling me here is, right, when I go to my shell and what I've been doing here previously, like x equals 5, you write your code after these triple arrows. So this is just telling me that if I were to call 2022, it should return 2022. Which now if I go ahead and I run 2022 here, I'm gonna have to print that result. If I run that, I get 2022, which is really good because it's exactly what the behavior of the function was specified to do. Okay, so that's like a simple question. And then what if we were to do like this one here? So it says we need to define two functions. So one that will make the area of a function of a sphere, give me the area of a sphere or the volume of the sphere with the input of the radius. So say define a function, say area sphere. So did that say area? Okay, I guess it means surface area. Surface area of a sphere of radius r, radius. Then I could return 4 times, well, we need pi. So how, well, okay, the equation for a area of a sphere is 4 times pi times r squared, r times r. Another way to square a number in Python is to have a double multiplication, times 2. So this just means r squared, and I'll leave that as a, here's the formula that we need to apply. So 4 times pi times r squared. And then if you remember from before, we had the math library. So from math, we could import pi. Okay, yeah. And then I can just use pi here, straight up. I just write return 4 pi times, oh, okay, autofill, radius squared. And then now if I were to run area sphere, I could pass in maybe sphere of radius 2. It will give me, oh, I need to print that out, my bad. Print that, okay. What does that give me? 50 point whatever. So that works. The volume of the sphere would be the same thing. You just use the volume of sphere equation. Okay. How about we try this one? So where's jacket? And question 3. So let's see what it's saying here. Question 3. Okay, question 3, rain or shine. So this is just saying we need to determine whether Alfonso is going to wear a jacket. And he only wears a jacket outside if the temperature is below 60 degrees or if it's raining. And write a function that will take in the current temperature as an integer and then a Boolean value telling me if it's raining or not. So here's my function, define where's jacket, and as you can see, this is the behavior of the function. So if it's 90 degrees, and then if it's false, so like if raining is false, that just tells me that, okay, according to the assignment directions, it says that if it is below 60 or if it's raining, then he'll wear a jacket. So what we need to do is, if the temperature is, oh, okay, and then I'm assuming we'll return true or false whether you wear a jacket. So, so it says that if it's below 60, so if temp is less than 60, or we have if raining is equal to true. So if it is raining. So these are the two conditions. And then in Python, if we were doing Java, actually, we would just return temp less than 60 or raining equals true. And remember, the double equals is to evaluate whether raining is equal to this value, not assigning true to this value. But in Python, instead of using this symbol for or, it's very simple. If you could guess what we use, it's just or. So we could literally just type or. So what we're going to do is return temperature is less than 60 or raining is true. And then we will just see the value of this. So if we wanted to, where's jacket? If we call, let's see, 90 false. So over here it says if we were to call 90 false as inputs to this function, then we should get false, and that's exactly what we got. If we try 40 and false, then we should get true. We do get true. And if we type in 100, then we should get true, and we get false. Wait a second. Oh, hang on. 100 and true. That gives me true. Okay, cool. All right. Does this make sense to everyone so far? What I'm doing here? You guys have any questions? We only have 2 minutes left anyways, so I think I'm just gonna stop here for now, and then maybe I'll go over some of the, actually I'll go over one more question. I'll go over this one, question 4. This is a pretty cool one. If you guys like math. So what we're gonna do is we want a function that, given an input like n, it will return the value of the sum of the numbers 1 to n. So if I gave it this right here, a common thing is the sum of 1 to n. The formula is equal to n times n plus 1 divided by 2. So in this case, I would just return n times n plus 1 over 2. And say if I wanted to see the value of what this would give me here, I can just print it out. So print sum naturals of 5. So the sum of the numbers from 1 to 5 should give me 15, which is exactly what I'm given here. But as you can see, it gives me 15.0. So that is actually a float, but the doc test is telling me it should give me an integer. So how can we resolve that issue? Well, we could use a double slash. So something I also forgot to go over earlier is that when in Python division, if I did 1 divided by 2, by default that gives me 0.5. In Java, that would give me, I believe, a 0, because in Java by default it does integer division. So it'll take 1 divided by 2, which is 0.5, but then it'll round it down to an integer, which is going to be 0. It always goes down, rounds down. But in Python, by default, we have like normal division, and integer division is with a double slash. So 1 divide 2 will give me 0. For example, if I did 5 divided by like 6, that gives me 0.833. Or if I did like 7 divided by 3, gives me 2.33. But if I did 7 double slash 3, that gives me 2. So over here, if I use a double slash, that'll automatically round it to an integer. So now we get 15 instead of 15.0. Another way around this, if I didn't want to use the double slash, is I could use a typecast. So I could just put this all inside of int. And int itself is a function, but it just takes its input and converts it to an integer. So over here, same thing, gives me 15. So yeah. And then part 2 of this question tells me, okay, turn this function into a lambda expression. So let's try that right now. Let's take sum naturals and turn it into a lambda. So I'm just going to call this sum n. And remember, I use a lambda as the keyword, and I take an n as an input, and I just return n times n plus 1 divided by 2. And then if I were to call this, say call sum n5, and print this out, and I'll just comment that out. This should give me 15. It does. So this is the exact same behavior as this function up here, except it's all in one line. Yeah. I think that's about it for today. That's just recap of everything. We just went over statements and expressions as well as functions. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions before I end the stream? Okay, I'm gonna guess no. And thank you guys for joining. This video is also going to be, well, it's live streamed on YouTube, so it'll be up and available if you guys want to come back to it, if you want to share it to anyone else. It'll just be like a YouTube video. So yeah, thank you for joining, and I'll see